on the situation of human rights in Palestinian territories. It is our pleasure to welcome at this press conference today the author of the report, the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. Mr. Pineda and Ms. Albanese will give their introductory remarks at the beginning, and after that you will be able to ask questions. So I would first give the floor to Mr. Pineda. You have the floor. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have people here in the room and also people connected online. I'd like to thank the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories for being here. She is someone who speaks clearly and calls things by their name. Francesca speaks very clearly, and this has not always been the case in society in the past. The report that she has just brought out to the UN General Assembly is already a statement. Its title is Anatomy of a Genocide. And it's important for her to explain exactly what's happening in this European Parliament. If I just take myself as an example, as the chair of the Delegation for Relations with Palestine, I can't talk about genocide. I have to hide something that even the UN recognizes, that the Council and the International Court of Justice recognizes that Israel is carrying out genocide against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. But the European Parliament, the European Union, does not recognize what everybody else recognizes. And this is shameful. It's a shame that the European Union has still not called for unconditional, permanent, immediate ceasefire. This is something that the International Criminal Court has called for. It's shameful that the European Union is still buying and selling arms to Israel that are being used in combat, that are falling on the heads of Palestinian children in the Gaza Strip. We are talking about human rights, and yet we allow them to buy these arms. It's shameful that the European Union is maintaining these relations with Israel. I don't think there's any question that Israel is violating the human rights of people in the Gaza Strip. And yet, as president of the Delegation for Relations with Palestine, I can't even call things by their name because the European Parliament has not recognized that genocide is taking place there and has not taken the decision to take any actions against this genocidal regime in Israel. They make declarations. What use is that when we're seeing Palestinian children being killed? They don't take any actions against the regime. We have the Horizon Europe project, and we're still financing those drones that are killing Palestinians. But we can't ask the European Commission to stop because, unfortunately, this Commission has a majority which in an active or passive way are supporting what we're not allowed to call genocide. If I can't say this clearly, then I'm happy to hear from Francesca Albanese, who has set it out in her report. I'm happy that she is here with us to talk about her report called Anatomy of a Genocide. Go ahead, please, Francesca.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So after 5 months of monitoring and analyzing Israel's onslaught on Gaza, my report, which I presented to the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly, but this report finds that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating that Israel is committing the crime of genocide against Palestinians as a group in Gaza has been met. Specifically, I found that Israel has committed 3 acts of genocide with the requisite intent. First, killing members of the group. Second, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Third, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destructions in whole or in part. The flagrant and systematic slaughter of Palestinian civilians, the deployment of unlawful weaponry, the utter obliteration of vital civilian infrastructure, including the deliberate targeting of all Gaza's hospitals, and the human-made starvation of the Palestinian people in Gaza transcend the realm of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The monstrosity unfolding in Gaza is accompanied by a pervasive anti-Palestinian narrative and dehumanization emanating from the uppermost tiers of Israeli society, including high-ranking officials with command authority, and frequently reflected in soldiers' actions on the ground. This reflects the intent, the dolus specialis, which is prescripted in the Genocide Convention, to destroy a group in whole or in part, which is what distinguishes genocide from other atrocity crimes. In the case of Gaza, there exists a chilling clarity of this purpose, the systematic eradication of an entire people blamed for what has been done to Israeli civilians on the 7th of October, or at least a significant portion thereof. One of the key findings is that Israel's executive and military leadership and soldiers have intentionally distorted jus in bello principles, so rules of international humanitarian law, subverting their protective functions in an attempt to legitimize genocidal violence against the Palestinian people in Gaza. The only reasonable inference that can be drawn from the unveiling of this legal policy is an Israeli state policy of genocidal violence toward the Palestinians in Gaza. And indeed, what distinguishes this genocide from others is what I've called humanitarian camouflage. So the justification that the conduct of hostilities that Israel has never denied, but was justified through the use of legal terminology, legal jargon, like human shields, warnings, evacuation orders, safe zones, medical shielding. So I will be happy to take your questions now.
Both. Just to remind you that the official position of the European Parliament you can find in the resolutions that the Parliament adopted on the 14th of March on the immediate risk of starvation in Gaza and attacks on humanitarian delivery, and of the 18th of January on the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the risk of escalation. And now, yes, please, let's continue with questions. If we have anybody. Yes, please.
Hello, this is Maret Jones from Euronews. Thank you for this press conference. My first question to Ms. Albanese. Thank you for outlining the report. You also call in that report for specific measures, arms embargoes, further sanctions. So given that you're here in Brussels in the European Parliament today, what measures, if any, do you think the European Union need to take more than what they've already taken in order to prevent the perpetuation of this catastrophic situation in the Gaza Strip? And also perhaps how content or perhaps disappointed are you with the measures that have been taken so far? Y para el eurodiputado Pineda.
And for Mr. Pineda, you said there is evidence that the EU is financing to Israeli companies that are building drones through the Horizon Europe program. Could you give us more information about this? For example, I wasn't aware of this, so if you could give us more information, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm just going precisely to the recommendations that I've made to member states when I presented my report to the Human Rights Council. I called for an arms and oil embargo on Israel, as well as other economic and political measures, including sanctions. This must be imposed both on state and non-state actors in order to ensure a permanent ceasefire, which, by the way, has also been ordered by the Security Council, whose resolutions are binding and is still not in effect. And Israel needs to be taken back to compliance with international law. This is the only thing that can secure safety, security, and freedom for everyone living between the Jordan River and the sea. I think that it's fundamental to explore what the UN Charter allows to do in the presence of massive international wrongful acts, which are countermeasures, including revoked diplomatic recognition, targeted sanctions on government officials, economic and political sanctions, including suspending, for what concerns the European Union, the EU-Israel Association Agreement, and other trade and institutional relations with Israel and Israeli institutions. This extends to private corporations registered under national jurisdictions of EU member states. And it's very important to say that there were the conditions to suspend that association agreement before the 7th of October. Because think of one for all, but the establishment of settlements, the continuous announced annexation of the occupied Palestinian territory was already a war crime. Forced displacement of the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory has been a reality for 57 years. So why have measures not been taken to stop this? Because this was a war crime. So what was the sense of that Article 2 in that agreement? So there is also a need for accountability. And to that end, in addition to supporting South Africans' actions, as you know, South Africa has instituted proceedings for violations of the Genocide Convention against Israel. I recommend that supporting thorough, independent, transparent investigation of atrocity crimes, especially acts amounting to genocide, referring the genocide situations in Palestine to the ICC, cooperating with the Commission of Inquiry that the Human Rights Council established in 2021 for an independent fact-finding and investigative accountability mechanisms, and the use of universal jurisdictions, especially in those countries whose nationals have served in the Israeli occupation army. And it's very important to understand that in Europe in particular, there is a disconnect, not just between the reality in the occupied Palestinian territory and the diktat of political leaders. There is also a disconnect between what civil society in Europe, what many segments of the society, citizens are protesting, are asking for a ceasefire. And this is met with silencing and repression. So this is a turning point. It's a momentous turnaround of history. And it's about time to realize that continuing business as usual is going to be detrimental for democratic orders, detrimental for the Palestinians, and also for the Israeli society.
Through the Horizon Europe program, 2 Israeli companies, one is Elbit Systems, I can't remember the name of the other, but 2 companies have received funding, and they produce drones, amongst other things, that are used in Gaza. I'll just have a quick check to make sure that I'm right. The European Defence Fund from the EU gave Israel Aerospace Industries a sum of gave Israel funding for its arms industry. This was for military research. There was a recent report from the De La Center. It's a center that studies the arms industry. And they have systematically spoken out about this. We do it as well in Spain. Our government is buying and selling arms from Israel. And this centre is focused on this campaign to make this information known. Often information is very opaque. If I may just pick up on what our colleague from the press services said. What I've said hasn't contradicted the European position. I just want to summarise. What we want to say is that we're selling arms. We're selling arms. And what this means is that we're working against the people of Gaza. Israel is blocking land access to allow people to leave Gaza, and then the bombs are raining down on them. People have gone into the sea. We should be ashamed of what is happening here. We should be ashamed. There are companies, not just Israeli companies, even the United States, saying what's happening is in Israel. There is an 18 billion fund for arms. 2.3 million Palestinians need to have access to water, to electricity, to food, medicine, and yet they are being bombed. We are raining bombs down on 2.3 million people. I think that in a year's time, we'll look at what we are doing and we are going to be ashamed, some more than others. Some are trying to put an end to this, but the European Union as an institution, I think we have to say that we have our hands covered in blood of the Palestinian people.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hello, thank you very much for this conference.
Microphone, please.
EU back. So we have a question. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am Ahmed Frasini from EUPAC, media platform and organization in Brussels. So the question is to Mr. Pineda. So thank you. You gave us a very good image about the reality, what happens in Palestine today. But how to realize the ideas of the European Union when we are talking here about the rights of women, rights of children, rights of journalists, rights of doctors, all the transparency with the European consumer, respect of the legal and law and international law, and we sign the agreements against genocide and all of these a long list. So how to work on this list, these rights, which Europeans are working every day on them? What are the machines, the mechanism, the tools, what we can use here in the European Parliament or by the European Parliament from your point of view to go further? And will the European elections, do you think that will change something, or do you have a program? Maybe you can give us some news how the elections could help us as Palestinians or as Palestinian rights defenders. Thank you, and thank you for your coming, Madam Albanese, to here today. We are waiting for some tools, for legal tools, what we can use as journalists, activists, and political. Are we waiting for new South Africa, new countries which will support South Africa in the nearest future? Do you have some news about that? Thank you.
We have to finish our press conference because not yet, please reply, but very quickly because our interpreters will have to leave very soon. So if you could reply to this question. Question was a bit long, shortly. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief, to not go too much beyond time. The European Union has mechanisms to put pressure on Israel. It's another matter of whether or not they want to do this. I can give you my personal view, because as president of the delegation, I can't go beyond the scope of what I've been given by the EU. But personally speaking, we can put on pressure through breaking off any type of relation with Israel. What we want is to achieve an immediate, unconditional, permanent ceasefire. We've not called for that yet. We need to put an end to financial, diplomatic, economic, cultural and relations with Israel, and above all, military cooperation. End association agreements, exclude Israel from any programs that are financed by the European Union. I referred before to the Horizon Europe program, for example. And as the European Union, we have to ensure that we associate and encourage member states to associate with South Africa's request. A number of other countries, Colombia and others, have also gone to the International Court of Justice. But the problem is that we haven't got the political will here at the moment.
So first of all, I would like to remind, when talking about legal remedies, that on the 26th of January, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, the supreme judicial organs of the United Nations, recognized the plausibility of genocide. That was like a starting point for a different action, in the sense, at that point, the international community, member states, which are obliged to abide by the Genocide Convention, they had no reasons not to take the measures we are talking about today, because the Genocide Convention is considered jus cogens, so it's non-derogable and imposes obligations on everyone, on every member state, both to prevent genocide. So if there is a risk, all possible necessary measures have to be taken to prevent genocide from being committed. And this is something that the court declared without examining the merits. I have examined the merits, which doesn't mean that, of course, the International Court of Justice will continue its examination, the International Criminal Court will continue its investigation, but at the same time I spent 5 months looking at what has happened into Gaza. And therefore, even letting aside my report, what the International Court of Justice ordered with its provisional measures was to be followed. International law cannot be considered as a pick-and-choose menu, because this leads to the erosion of the only thing that we have to secure peace and stability. And it has worked for most of us, especially in the West. And all of this is put at risk today. We are seeing also the full erosion of the international legal system as a system to protect us all. And there are legal actions that have to be taken as an obligation, and again, taking measures to impose, to create the conditions to impose nothing else than a ceasefire in Gaza. And it's very cynical to hear member states discussing of humanitarian pause. After 33,000 people have been killed, 70% women and children, and this has been steadily the death toll in Gaza. So it was clear that the victims were not just Hamas combatants, but also doctors, nurses, engineers, academics, scientists, children. This is the highest number of children's fatalities in a conflict. Actually, it's higher than the number of all children killed in the last 4 years in all conflicts worldwide. What else? What else? How dehumanized are the Palestinians to the point that we cannot relate to this? And it was the death of 6 internationals working for World Central Kitchen which provoked outrage. And what about the others? What about the others 198 workers who have been killed in Gaza? So you see, we also need to, I'm thinking of legal remedies, but I would like to conclude picking on what Manu Pineda said, we need will. You need will in the European Union to act, among European member states to act. But before the will, we need to really reconsider where our conscience and consciousness is. Because I'm even wondering what is left of our humanity if we cannot react with indignity to what we are letting happen to Gaza. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Did you want to say anything? Yes, go on.
The speaker kindly thanks the interpreters. And thank you to all of you as well. We finished. We don't have any more time. Thank you all very much.
For your questions. Thank you to Mr. Pineda and Ms. Albanese for their answers. And I wish you a nice day.